It's a ruling that the world has been waiting for. The Supreme Court today striking down President Trump's sweeping tariffs. Here with more insight on a blockbuster decision is the Hill's courts and legal reporter, Zach Schoenfeld. Zach, you were in the courtroom today when the decision was announced. Walk us through the basics of this ruling and what comes next.
Hey, Niall, a blockbuster ruling here that, as you mentioned, the markets, Wall Street, and Washington has been waiting for months. But here it is, right here in my hand, this 6-3 decision from the Supreme Court saying that the bulk of President Trump's tariffs cannot survive. This is a decision that all revolves around a 1977 law. It's called IEEPA for short, and it gives the president certain emergency powers to regulate imports in response to unusual and extraordinary threats against the U.S. So we've seen the president over the last year embark on a global trade war, declaring emergencies over fentanyl and later on trade deficits to impose tariffs on dozens of countries across the globe. But the Supreme Court here in the 6-3 decision saying that the president overread that 1977 statute, saying that the words regulate importation could not possibly give him the sweeping authority that the president had asserted here. So the bottom line, most of the president's tariffs that we've seen imposed over the last year are no more. And of course, the 6-3 ruling isn't the normal ideological lines we're used to seeing. This is a ruling where we had the majority, including of two of Donald Trump's own appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett.
Certainly. How big a blow is this to Trump, Zach? I mean, you mentioned the fact that it is a conservative Supreme Court, and tariffs, I think it's fair to say, were really the keystone of his economic policy. I know there's some possible workarounds, but how do you read the politics of this?
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways to look at it. First, just to take the 30,000-foot view, we've been talking about all these cases that have reached the Supreme Court involving Trump over the last year, and almost always until now, he has emerged victorious. But those cases all were on the Supreme Court's emergency docket. Those were technically preliminary decisions, caused a lot of controversy at times, but they were on the emergency docket. This tariffs decision is the first time that the court is deciding one of these Trump cases in his second term on their normal docket. This is the first time we're actually getting a final ruling on the legality of the president's policies. So, of course, there's been a lot of talk about what is the Supreme Court's relationship with Trump, and are they simply rubber stamping his policies? And as I've been talking to court watchers over the last year, there was a camp that believed that, okay, maybe on some of these emergency rulings they'll side with him, but when push comes to shove on some of these final rulings, that they won't. So for those court watchers, it is a little bit of vindication. But looking specifically at tariffs and what's ahead, I think it is a little bit more of a mixed bag, because there are other statutes out there. The president has backup plans, other statutes he can look to. And if you look at the dissenters today, led by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, one of the things he points out in his dissent is he says, okay, the president can't use this law, but there's a point where Kavanaugh says he doesn't think this is going to be a big impact for the president's tariff authority moving forward. So on tariffs, we still got a lot of battles ahead of us.
And one of those battles is obviously going to be about this issue of refunds. Now, I think this is, on a basic level, one of the most fascinating elements in all of this, because billions of dollars have been paid out in tariffs so far. Now, are we going to see companies, come with their receipts looking to be refunded? How would that work? What would that look like?
Well, they've already been lining up, Niall, in anticipation that this day would come. In fact, we've had hundreds of companies line up in court warning that if they waited for the Supreme Court decision, they were concerned that they'd be losing out on their refunds. So you can bet, now that this decision is hand, that they are going to move again. To give you an idea of the companies we're talking here, we're talking about a lot of prominent brands. It includes Columbia Sportswear, GoPro. If there's any fans of Yeti coolers out there, they too. I could keep going on with the list. There's just these hundreds of companies that have lined up. And even for companies that haven't already sued, you can imagine that they're going to get in on the action as well. But the key thing to know is that the Supreme Court's decision today says nothing about refunds. It is leaving it to the lower courts to figure this out. This is going to go back to the U.S. Court of International Trade. It's a court in New York that got this case when this tariffs battle began. And this is going to be a bit of a messy process. That's what Justice Amy Coney Barrett said back at the argument. She called this a mess, this process of refunds. But it is a big question mark, and that's going to be really the next battle, a big battle that's going to be playing out in the coming months. But I would just point out that the Trump administration, all of this litigation has been going on, they have been insisting that they will not object to the courts issuing refunds here. So it might be a mess, it might take a while, but a lot of companies out there today do believe that at some point in the future, they are going to get that refund.
One final thing, Zach, we only have about a minute left. This ruling, the Trump administration wanted a different ruling, but this is not the end of tariff policies, right? The administration believes it can continue with the tariff approach, but under different laws and powers, correct?
That's right. And up until this point, we don't know the specifics of what pathway the administration is going to take. As you mentioned, Niall, there's several pathways in front of them. There are other statutes out there. And we've heard, as this case has been at the Supreme Court, from people like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that there is a plan B, there is a backup option, but the administration has not yet articulated exactly what that backup option will be. So that's why all eyes now are on the White House and the administration for what pathway they're going to take. For example, there's a statute out there that says has some authority to impose tariffs on national security. That's what he's done to impose his steel and aluminum tariffs. He might go that route, but there's plenty of other statutes as well. So this is a big question mark, but there are lots of backup options that we may see the administration try to take. And you can imagine that those too might come under challenges and could once again, may end up at the Supreme Court.
Zach Schoenfeld, busy day for you. We really appreciate you joining us. Thanks very much.
Thank you.